Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio, the podcast for music lovers to expand their horizons into new and interesting musical subcultures. I'm your host, Morgan Rowe, founder of the Zeitgeist Academy. Each episode, I interview someone from a different musical community. Zeitgeist means spirit of the times, and my goal is to make that spirit come alive for you and help you appreciate musical communities you may not know much about. Before we get into the episode, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. You can see episodes and transcripts and also sign up for my newsletter. There's always more to a topic than can be covered in one conversation, so each week I send a deeper dive into something related to the topic. You'll also be able to access the archives to see past content. That's zeitgeist academy.com/radio. My guests today are Iain McAfee and Cara Weggler Menge, members of Irish folk band Dòrain. Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Thanks so much for having us, Morgan. It's really good to chat with you today.
This is going to be so much fun. Can you both explain who you are musically?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Iain McAfee, and I dabble around in a lot of different things in the Irish and Scottish musical world. I have a lot of really random things in my background, but I primarily play traditional Scottish and Irish music on the flute, on the Scottish small pipes, and the guitar, and I sing in Scots Gaelic. And we play together in our band Dòrain, and just get out there and have as much fun as possible.
Yeah, this is Cara Weggler Menge. I want to second the definitely have as much fun as possible part. I've been playing the violin for 28 years. I can say that now. I am classically trained, but then I came to Irish music later in life, but really enjoy it. And in addition to playing violin, I also took up another instrument called the bouzouki, and I enjoy playing around the sessions around town, enjoy playing with their band, and have traveled to Ireland and enjoy playing there too.
Nice. And then just fun connection for people to know. I have made music, with Iain a lot. Fun fact, Iain and I have traveled worldwide making music together.
Yeah, we went to Japan, and that was awesome.
That was awesome. You've been doing Irish music for quite some time. What was the first, what first brought you to interact with Irish music and fall in love with it?
Totally. Well, I kind of tell people that I came to Irish music by way of Scottish music, because that's kind of more my family's heritage. So my grandfather on my mom's side was a Highland piper. Cool. And so just having that be in my life as a small child was really influential. I was really excited every time he brought them out. Got some pictures of him holding out his bagpipes for me, and I'm standing on my tippy toes trying to blow into the bag. And
oh, that's adorable.
It's one of my favorite. Yeah, so the music was around me growing up. My parents listened to a lot of both Irish and Scottish music. And they kind of got me as a little kid by playing this compilation record called The Celts Rise Again, with nice overly dramatic name, because there was a track on it with a tune called Ian's Jig on it. And so look at this. And then sure enough, that tune is freaking awesome. And so I listened to that album obsessively as a child. And to this day, I still go back to that album, and it remains some of my favorite Irish and Scottish and even Breton tracks of all time are on there. Yeah, so that just gave me the bug. And then someone gave me a tin whistle for my, I think, 8th birthday. It might have been
nice.
9th. I can't remember at this point. And so then I would just pick it up and noodle around on it, try to pick out common song tunes, either hymns from church or just common songs that kids know, like Yankee Doodle and stuff like that. And then when my grandpa died, he, when we were looking through his things, one of the things he had was this book for teaching yourself the tin whistle. And so I took that and just taught myself how to play it, over the next several years, just completely by myself, not really knowing the technique behind it. And so there was a lot of relearning that had to be done. But when it really kind of took off was when I got to college at Macalester, and they had the Flying Fingers Ensemble there. And so I started playing the music with other people more often and started taking like bagpipe lessons there. Not gonna lie, one of the biggest reasons why I came to Macalester in the first place was to take bagpipe lessons.
Nice.
And then studying abroad in Edinburgh was like kind of the last big thing that just like cemented it, and going to sessions there and playing the music with people and just absorbing it the more traditional way while I was there. Just my playing took off way more during that time, and it just was cemented as like, this is going to be a part of my life forever while I was over there. That's me.
And I think it's a great story. And this is, again, Cara Weggler Menge. I will say that for me, I came to the music due to the influence of many different people. And first I want to say my violin teacher that I started with, Sherry Neubauer, she had the foresight as I was like an 8-9-year-old just starting my instrument, and kind of could tell like the Suzuki stuff I wasn't getting into as much. And we had someone who was actually from the Twin Cities originally, down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who played Irish music. And she was like, I think let's hit pause on Suzuki, and why don't you take a few lessons with my colleague here to get you still interested in playing the violin. Like she kind of saw right away if we only did classical, she might lose me, but if like she shows some other influences, like she might get me to have the bug, if she, as you say. And she did. Like I took a few lessons. I thought this was great. I love still learning by ear. That was always a thing for me. So I took a few of that, and then I did classical for a while. But I would say that Irish was always a little bit there. Like my parents got me this book of, they were Scottish fiddle tunes that I still have to this day. And we actually incorporated one of the tunes, or a couple tunes actually, from it in our band's repertoire. And then going back to Iain's story of Flying Fingers, which was the folk music group on campus, I also came to that group. I was playing klezmer music in that group. And I think, Iain, you were playing Irish music. And what was hilarious at the time was Macalester College was having a fundraiser, and they're like, hey, that folk music group, could you guys play something for this fundraiser? And probably this should be no surprise to people, but sometimes folk music groups aren't always the most organized. So none of the bands themselves were like organized enough to like play, but we were like, a part of the committee, if you will. So we were just like, okay, between the two of us, we've got to figure something out.
We'll throw something together. So
we got in an afternoon, and we were just like, I was like, well, I have played some Irish music, which was a surprising thing to Iain at the time, coming from klezmer, because he was like, I haven't played that much klezmer. And we just put some things together. And honestly, that was the most fun I had ever had. And what was hilarious is like people thinking that's the day Dòrain started. It's like, well, actually, it was more like, we'll see you in 2 years, because like Iain was a year ahead of me, and like we ran in different circles. But then we never forgot that moment, because then when Iain came back from Tacoma, I would say that's when he and this is, so if Sherry Neubauer led me to, I have to say Iain Dove McAfee then helped get me into the scene here, because he was like, hey, there's this place called Merlin's down where I live. Maybe you might enjoy going with me to these sessions. And I'm like, what's a session? And then I started, and that's really when I got the bug, I would say, is going to sessions with Iain.
And Cara committed the faux pas of ordering a PBR at her first session.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
The server definitely gave her a look when she ordered this.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's one of those. So notes to starters, don't order PBRs at any session you go to for the first time. Better to order like a water.
Somehow Cara was not put off by sessions by that moment.
No.
Well, I feel like that's an important word that we'll be using a lot. So can you share, because people probably don't know what a session is. I barely know what a session is.
I really am curious to see how Iain describes it, and I'll describe it my way.
Okay. How would you describe it, Iain?
So a session is, they're actually a relatively recent phenomenon in the world of traditional music, because all of the music we play is first and foremost dance music. It was made to be played for dancers at like these like Caelis and house gatherings, and well, house gathering and Caeli mean the same thing traditionally. Caeli just is like the Gaelic word for to visit. So it's just like, these house dances is what they're really for at the end of the day. But with the changing of the times and like when this music was in danger of starting to go out, and just like go extinct, then in the 1960s, people started rallying around it and trying to revive it. And so one of the innovations of that was, I mean, this had been happening prior to the 60s too, but the 60s is where it really got a big boost, was, gathering in pubs and just sitting down and just playing the music without the dancing, in pubs, just to sit down and share tunes together. So I would define a session as getting together, usually in a public place, to play tunes together and just enjoy conviviality.
Nice.
Yeah. And I want to also explain it in the sense that this music did originally come from like really itinerant musicians that would be traveling for different events, whether it was a barn raising or if it might have been just, someone's wedding. And that was then when people would dance and show their joyous traditions. And then really, it goes back to really Irish independence, trying to reclaim that heritage, and then that people would play in the pubs. So for me now, modern day Irish sessions generally are a group of musicians sitting, hence why session, usually sitting down together, and playing music. And it mostly takes place usually in a pub, but I will say there's other public places that it can take place too.
Nice. Thank you for explaining that. Before we get into that, I can already tell this is going to be quite like an amazing conversation. So Irish traditional music is a bit of an older tradition, right? A lot of these tunes are quite old, sometimes several hundred years old. So I'd like to kind of hear from you. Why does it speak to you now? Like in this day and age, how is it relevant and how does it speak to you now?
I'll take this question first. So I will say that the thing that has been so incredibly awesome about this music is it's a living tradition, is what we like to call it. So even though we play many tunes that were written in the 1700s, we probably play them in a slightly different way than they would be played. And then what's amazing to me is then people are doing these different variations and bringing in different musical instruments to play these tunes. And there's something really amazing that I can think to myself, I am playing something, like connecting to something that someone hundreds of years ago is still connecting with. And there's this kind of tie back from the past to the present that I really enjoy kind of thinking on. But then at the same time, we have people in this tradition. I'm going to shout out some names here, but Liz Carroll is a famous fiddler from Chicago who writes her own tunes, and they sound probably to other people who have never heard of Irish music, oh, this is just an Irish tune, what's the big deal? But the fact that she's writing these modern tunes that are also crafted just helps to, I would say, layer on to the tradition. So we're continually adding to that. So I guess I kind of like this music because I feel like I'm connecting to a past, but also helping to bring forward this music so it lives on to the present.
To me, it's just never mattered that these tunes are all that old, because at the end of the day, I play this music and I listen to this music because it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like that's why it's had this longevity, is just, when you walk into a room and there's Irish music playing, you know exactly what you're listening to, and it gets people excited. People walk over to the session table at the various pubs we play at just to walk over and be like, what are they doing? I don't know. It just is so full of life.
It's got a zeitgeist.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I love that word. Both of you are like, that's exactly. It's alive. You're feeling the spirit of the times in the music, and whether that's modern or connected to several hundred years.
Totally.
That makes me happy. So Dòrain, what does that mean, and how did that happen? And I know we don't have all of the members here, so can you kind of explain how all of you got together?
Totally. Well, Dòrain kind of came from like a merger of two different like musical projects that I was a part of at first. So there was like Cara was describing with us playing together towards the end of college, following college when I moved back to the Twin Cities. And then on the other hand, I have always played music with my brother growing up. And as we got older, that became more and more a part of our like brotherly relationship. And Alexander, my brother, really loves to record music in his home studio. So we just would do these goofy recordings of like drinking songs, even though like neither of us had any idea what we were talking about with drinking. But we just like, oh, these lyrics are hilarious. Alcohol. And then then Alexander decided to move up to the Twin Cities. And so I just like invited everyone over to like have some tunes together, and it just kind of clicked right away because we had like all these songs and tunes already that I played with Cara, all these songs and tunes I played with Alexander already. And so it just clicked together like a couple of puzzle pieces that were always meant to go there. And then eventually, we added Maddie to the band because we were looking for maybe a guest musician to sit on a track with us. And we said, well, you should, just play with us for a lot of the songs during the album release. And we're like, well, we're just having such a good time playing with you. Do you want to just join permanently? As for the name, when Cara, Alexander, and I were working on, trying to figure out what we wanted to call ourselves, I don't know if you've ever gone through the process of trying to name a band, Morgan. Is that something you've experienced before?
I've been on the fringes. I've never been, I've been on the fringes.
It's the worst. Trying to come up with a band name is like friendship torture.
I mean, we should have kept a log of like all the ones we didn't name ourselves, so people.
Yes, you should have.
But yeah.
Yeah. And we like had an agreement that whatever we chose had to be unanimous. Because like we didn't want anyone to have regrets over what we called ourselves, or like want to change our name later. So we rattled through a whole bunch of things. A common thing to do is like name your band after like the title of a tune, but nothing was really clicking there. And then another thing people often do will like just pick an Irish or a Gaelic word for the name of the band. So we started going with that route. I was flipping through my Gaelic dictionary. And we noticed that a lot of the songs we had been choosing kind of had this nautical theme. So we're thinking of like ocean related things. But you can find a lot of words that would sound good as a band name, but trying to spell it would be very difficult on people. So we had to pick something that was at least anglicizable decently well. And so eventually the first word that we hit on that sounded good as a band name kind of clicked with that theme we were going for, and was possible to spell in a way that people might have some prayer of knowing how to pronounce, was Dòrain, which is just like the Scots Gaelic word for otters.
Oh, cute.
And we wanted to have that like playful connotation in there. And it just lent itself to like all our otter themed band artwork that we have. So still pretty happy with that choice.
Yeah, I would say it definitely is a way in, because sometimes people, they do look at it like Dòrain, like they're not sure how to say it, but then when you kind of explain like we're the otters, that they just say exactly what you said, Morgan, which is cute. So.
It is cute. Oh, so let's talk about the community really quickly. So you've already mentioned sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And you've briefly touched on Caeli. And Caeli, also my understanding is that's a social dance as well, right?
Right.
It's not just a house party at someone's house. Like there's an active dance element to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other spaces are there in this community, the
Well, I
Irish
wanted
community?
to take off from the Caeli because this is a really great phenomenon that's happening called, and especially I heard it talked about in the New York scene called Gaelies, which is
Okay.
social dance that's happening in gay bars, which are the social dance of like Irish social dance happening in gay bars. So I just, again, going back to what we were saying about living tradition, here is this, like these dances that probably happened like hundreds of years ago that are now being done with the LGBT community and celebrated. So I love that. But going back to just the community at large, what's interesting a lot is that I would say music, even though the musicians always play with the dancers, it's hard sometimes to find those spaces that we both come together, because sometimes it's like there's something, especially competition wise, it's like this is for musicians and this is for dancers and neither of the two shall meet, is sometimes how it is in competitions. And what's amazing though is I think there's been more done to try to have some of that mixing going on, especially with I think it's not happening in the competitions as much as it possibly could, but I am noticing with the festivals that there's been more of both coming and goings of that. And I was also going to say a shout out to our community here in the Twin Cities with the Center for Irish Music and the Celtic Junction. We have a dance school that's in the Celtic Junction Code O'Shea Irish Dance, as well as Center for Irish Music. And I've noticed that there's a lot of collaboration between those two.
I would say like the kind of natural habitat of the music is just in the home, so kind of the most natural place to find it is people inviting each other over to like have a cup of tea and play a few tunes, right? We mentioned Caeli's before, but one thing that a lot of people don't understand about Caeli's is that traditionally they're not just a dance. Like a lot of the time people think, oh, we're having a Caeli, so everyone just comes out and dances these folk dances. But really what they are is just a community gathering that's almost more like an open mic set more than anything else, because people just gather around. They would do some dances, but then in between, people like take turns is what it's called. And so it's like, who wants to do a turn? And so someone might, like the old guy in the corner who doesn't play any music, but he might go, well, let me tell you the story of old Tom's goat, and like kind of go on this storytelling tangent. Someone might sing a song. People might just like tell some jokes. Just all kinds of things. Like I remember when I lived on Iona, this tiny Scottish island, we would have Caeli's every Monday. And for the turns, like obviously people like always wanted me to play the bagpipes. So I would like begrudgingly take them out. I'd be like, well, okay, I'm really out of practice, but okay. But then you would also get stuff as random as like my friend Linnea just taught everyone the dance to Baby Shark, and everyone shark in the village hall on this tiny island. So it's like
traditional American dance
happen at a Caeli, and so sometimes people call like the more traditional Caeli's like fireside Caeli's to emphasize that it's not just a dance, and that maybe it's the emphasis is on more the other stuff. Some other spaces you can find like Irish music though is just like concerts. Like the Celtic Junction Arts Center in St. Paul has a wonderful series of concerts going on where they get some really just world-class musicians in there coming to play. There's also Irish pipe bands similar to Scottish pipe bands. Like the Irish war pipes are very similar to the Scottish Highland bagpipes. And so they play in a very similar way, but focus the songs and tunes more on Irish tunes than Scottish tunes.
There's a lot of festivals too that are in America, Ireland. And also I was going to say like shout out to the Irish diaspora. There's a vibrant Irish scene in Japan and in Australia. So like you can go to different festivals across the world that will also be like playing and celebrating this music. And the other thing I want to give a shout out for, that's a resource for both finding places that you might want to listen to this music in addition to finding the tunes themselves, is the session.org. Is a great resource. And so, for example, sometimes if I'm traveling to a place like I'm going to the Bay Area, I want to see what sessions are around, I can just type that in, and then there's a resource that would be like, okay, here at this pub or this restaurant at this time, this is where you can go listen. So that's another way.
That's amazing. Do either of you dance?
Not really. Like I can
Mostly play?
hold my own in a Caeli setting, but like Maddie's the dancer of the band.
Yeah, Maddie is, I would say, the true dancer. She is very gracious. I've been her partner in the Caelis, and she's very gracious as I stumble through most of the steps. But yeah, I would say I'm not a very good dancer, but I do enjoy watching the dancing.
Yeah, nice. So at these events, and you've mentioned before that the tunes are tied to the dances. So can we kind of get some words going here, like definitions?
Sure.
What are a few different types of tunes / dances that you would see or that you play?
Totally. Some of this is very regional to different parts of Ireland, but like the big ones that you can find pretty much all across the country and all across the diaspora are jigs, reels, hornpipes, and then like some different types of jigs, like slip jigs, are pretty common across the board. And then there's like some more regionally specific tunes like polkas and slides and highlands, things like that. And then what distinguishes them all is just their rhythms from each other. So you've got reels, which originally were from Scotland and then got ported over to Ireland, are just have that driving like 4/4 pretty fast paced da 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 rhythm. And so you dance all kinds of the Caeli dances sometimes have all these random names attached to it that almost have like a storytelling element to it.
I think the Waves of Tory is one that's
right.
done a lot, which is actually really fun to watch, because what will happen is the dancers will lift up their hands and people will go underneath them, and then then the next time you're going underneath, so they're taking alternating turns, and it makes it look like there's waves going on in the dance floor, which is really cool.
Oh, and the Virginia reel on the Scottish side of things is a Scottish reel Caeli dance. Jigs have the 6/8 rhythm, the da 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 da. And those have a bajillion, like the Siege of Venice, I know.
Haymakers jig.
The Haymakers. And then on the Scottish side, like Strip the Willow is one that you dance to that, where people are doing a lot of like linking arms and swinging around each other, like, or sometimes grabbing hands in the middle and using, like the scene in Titanic under decks, where they're like grabbing hands and whirling each other around at top speed. Like that's something that would happen to a lot of like jig Caeli dances, like Strip the Willow.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I wanted to call out here is set dancing, which could be that it was like more of 4 people that were doing the dances. Sean-Nós dancing is also separate than step dancing, and it wasn't necessarily like people all in a group. It would just be people who were really amazing dancers, and they would kind of start, and they might also dance with like a partner or 3 others, but they would do their own kind of steps to it. And a lot of we are really I would say lucky here. We have some amazing Sean-Nós dancers as well.
Yeah. And Sean-Nós is just Irish for old style. So it's just the old style dancing that, you know, at first glance looks kind of similar to like Irish step dancing, but it is like distinct. And you'd have to ask a dancer to explain the intricacies of that.
Yeah, I probably should have one on the podcast. It sounds like there's a lot to it. I am very excited to share that Iain, Cara, and Maddie are joining forces with the Zeitgeist Academy to teach our upcoming class called Irish Immersion. This class is for people who play and love music. Any instrument will be able to join. The main designations used in the curriculum are melody or rhythm. For example, a flute is a melody player, a guitar is likely a rhythm player. This class is also for a wide range of levels. Iain and Cara are so good at breaking down complex ideas into simple, accessible pieces while also giving plenty of space for more experienced players to spread their wings and try something new. Also, Maddie will be sharing all sorts of information about Irish dance, and you may even learn a few of these dances that Iain and Cara are mentioning in this episode. Head over to zeitgeistacademy.com for more information and to enroll. Classes begin May 20th, 2024. At the end of this interview, I feel like I have more questions about the Irish folk music scene than when we started. One thing I wanted to talk about was the instrumentation. There are a lot of unique Irish instruments you don't really see elsewhere. So instead, I'm going to send an email out with pictures of the instruments listed here, as well as links to a few resources Iain and Cara recommend. If you would like to receive this email and others like it, go to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio and sign up for my newsletter. My goal is to deliver interesting and relevant material to you and help take away any barriers to learning cool things about different musical subcultures. That's ZEITGEIST academy.com. What are some differentials between Irish and Scottish? You've mentioned several times that they're distinct. Are they something that someone who doesn't know a lot about either one, like someone like me, could just differentiate, like, oh, this is Irish versus, oh, this is Scottish?
The lines get blurry in some spots. If you think of it like a spectrum, like there's part of the spectrum towards the middle where they can be extremely similar to each other, but then there's like further out parts on the spectrum where they can sound massively different from each other.
Yeah.
I would say like the biggest differences in terms of Scottish versus Irish is instrumentation and like how the rhythm is felt and some tune types that are really specific to those two different traditions. So tune types that they have in common would be like the ones I just rattled off of: jigs, reels, hornpipes, and slip jigs. Those are all shared between both traditions. But I would say in Irish music, you typically feel more of a swing in the rhythm with all of those. Like in an Irish reel, you might have more of like a da 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 to exaggerate just ever so slightly. Whereas in Scottish music, you would tend to play the reel more straight, but with a lot more syncopation, especially in modern Scottish tunes. Or like sometimes there's a rhythmic device called a Scotch snap, where you usually would notate it as a 16th note followed by a dotted 8th note. So it has this da-da sort of feel to it. And it's very distinctly Scottish. Very few other musical traditions have it in it. Although now like modern rap has kind of taken that on. So you hear Scotch snaps in like a lot of modern rapping, like Cardi B and stuff like that. But so if you hear the Scotch snap, though, it's almost certainly a Scottish tune, unless it's a Highland, which is a type of tune from the very north of Ireland, which has a lot more in common with Scottish music than further south on the island. Then, like in terms of specific tune types, in Scottish music, kind of the most iconically Scottish tune type is called a strathspey, where that Scotch snap rhythm is everywhere. So like strathspeys can have this sort of rhythm to them. And you would like never hear that in Irish music. And even in like Donegal music, that would be smoothed out a little bit more. Whereas like on the far other end of that spectrum, way in the south of Ireland, you have polkas and slides, which are like endemic to the Slieve Luachra area.
Which is crazy because I totally thought that polkas were like a Norwegian like thing. Like,
well, they are too. Yeah. Like these, I think you even do like the same dance step to them that you do for like continental polkas, but just they sound so different just because they're Irish.
yeah.
Yeah.
Polkas are fun. I've danced polkas. They are exhausting,
super
very
fun.
energetic, but they
Yeah.
are fun. Wow. So much information. How in the world, and Carol, can we start with you? Like, you're classically trained, and yes, you learned a bit by ear. And Suzuki, going back to that, is a method of learning violin specifically. It's a method of learning music, but I think it's super used in violin specifically. But what was it like coming from that training to learning all of these tune types, and you learn it by ear? Is that correct? Can we talk about that? Like, what was it like learning all of these in the beginning? There's so many.
Yeah. So to build on what you're saying, Suzuki, his method was like, instead of learning straight from looking at like reading music and then learning notes, his whole thing was you should listen and you should know these classical pieces by heart by listening first, and then it will be easier for you to play your instrument that way. And so in a way, having that as my background did make it a little bit easier to then come to Irish music, which is very much an oral tradition. Like hardly ever are you going to see a sheet of music when another player is going to teach you a tune. You're going to learn tunes by listening by ear. But I was going to say, like, you know, it was challenging because I would hear something, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool, but how do you do that? And there's a lot of ornaments within Irish music. I'm going to say one ornament being a roll, which is you like play up a note, you play up the note, down the note, below the note, up and up. No, so da 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 da, like is like a roll. And I would hear people do these like really lightning fast ones. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then of course I try and it just sounds not what they did, right? And so I had to kind of sit down with it and really, you know, practice those parts to make it sound, I would say, more Irish. I would say, coming from a classical background, I could get the notes, but I couldn't get the style first. So first I was really good. I could get those notes. I could get what I would say like were the bare bones of those tunes. But then to really make it sound like that style, it really took talking to other fiddlers. I would say, like, it was great to have other fiddlers that were open to me about how they play. I want to shout out to Danny Diamond, Mary Benorny, who are here in our music community, but they've really helped me along the way to listen to those to the Irish style and get to know that better. And also thank you to Center for Irish Music for having a Minnesota Irish Music Weekend where they bring in these amazing artists. So I learned more from some musicians that I may never have crossed paths with. But I think the hardest thing was really letting go of this perfectionism. I think that kind of comes sometimes of from classical, where it's like, you need to play this vibrato in this way. And like, from classical violin, I will say the biggest thing you have to give up is vibrato. Like, you're so used to, at every note when you're playing an orchestra, it's vibrato, vibrato, vibrato. And then in Irish music, you're like, you hardly ever do vibrato. The only time it comes out is, again, it's like an ornament, and it only really comes out in airs, which are this tune type that come from songs, like you're emanating a song. And so maybe you're kind of emanating the voice a little bit. So you might do a tiny bit of vibrato, but it's not nearly like classical music. And so I think letting go of that perfectionism and realizing, taking more of a learning mindset of like, you're not going to know every single tune that everyone plays. And that's the joy of it. You're going to be learning every time that you come together. And so that's the amazing thing, is then you can be like, oh, what was that tune? And someone will give you the name of the tune. And hopefully while they were playing, you had your phone out or some kind of recording device, and you press play and you recorded that. And then you say, oh, thank you. And then you kind of know, and you list that on your recording device, and you go home and you play it for like, hours and hours and hours upon that week. And then hopefully you'll see the person in weeks to come and you'd be like, hey, can you play that tune? You know, the one that you played, and then you'll be able to play along with them. And I think that was the difference for me, is not thinking that you needed to come so well practiced before.
Yes.
That being there is a part of the practice. Being present is part of the practice.
Yeah. Because I, like, from the classical world, that's obviously my background, and I haven't branched out into I branched out into a few other styles, but that is a challenge for me. And I know that's a challenge. I've had a lot of other people come on this podcast who are classically trained, and that is a challenge that I think just comes from the training. Is like if I were to play with you, I would want to know what the songs were, and I would look up the sheet music, and I would, practice by staring at the sheet music. And then I would come and, and to show up, and not the idea of showing up and intentionally, like I just knowing I'm not going to know what's going on. I think for some classical folks that could make us feel pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, which is why I will say the other thing I want to say to people who are Irish music curious or curious about going to a session, it is okay to come and just listen and not expect to play, just to be there and just to be like, I'm just absorbing this music. That is a very welcome thing and part of it. I will say one of my favorite, going back to, I think you talked about Zeitgeist moments. Some of my favorite Zeitgeist moments are when I'm playing and I look up and there's a child. It can sometimes be a child at heart, it can be an adult, but they're just dancing, not necessarily doing, the step dance. They're just dancing to what they want to dance to, this music, because it's moved them to that point. And that, I think, getting that joy from that is back to your phrase, is a Zeitgeist moment.
Nice. So let's shift to when you are performing this music. So can you speak to some things that may be going on under the surface that other people may not know about? For example, melodies. You've talked about variation being really important. I vaguely know that there's a specific form to some of the songs, stuff like that. Like, can you speak to maybe some structure or other things going on under the surface of these tunes?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, part of that is going to be very, very context dependent, right? Because how it is when we're playing at a session is very different from when we're playing it for a dance, which is very different from when we're playing it as a band on a stage. And all of those have like different expectations and whatnot.
And we would arrange it differently. I did want to point out format though. So when we're playing for dancers, the main thing I always have to think in my head is 3 A's. So usually tunes have an A part and a B part, and they might have more parts than that, but usually we do A part twice, B part twice, go back to A. But when you play for dancers, you're kind of playing an intro to get them used to it. So you have to remember to play the A part the first time 3 times, because the first time you play through the A is like the intro. You're getting the feel, the beat, and then you kind of start with the dancers. So 3 parts A, 2 parts B, and then it goes 2 parts A, 2 parts B, and
what the dancers don't see, because they're distracted trying to figure out the rhythm, is all the musicians looking at each other dead in the eye, like, don't go to that fucking B part now.
yeah, like don't F it up. Like, really, like staring down, like, don't F it up, because it does F up their dancing if you did that. Like, so you have to make sure you don't F it up.
Sorry, I don't know if this is a swearing podcast.
It's fine.
Yeah, so that's a big thing with dances. And then like with dances, it's also, when the dancers are done dancing, you just stop playing.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So again, my classically structured brain doesn't like that. What do you mean you just stop playing? Like, is there like a little hook at the end? Like, how do you, what?
No, you just like finish the part you're playing, but like if you're in the middle of the A part and the dancers just finished, you're like, okay. So usually someone will kick out their foot, or one of the musicians will go, huh! And then that's the signal to like wrap it up. This is the last time we're playing this tune, and we just finish at the end of the A part. We don't go on. Yeah. And that is actually a thing that happens in all 3 settings, is the kick or the hup to signal either to move on to the next tune, or it's basically the signal, this tune is coming to an end, whether that means we're about to switch tunes or it's time to wrap up the set.
And Iain means in all three settings, whether that's in a session or that's playing on stage or that's playing for a dance. Now, going to more performance, like when we're playing on a stage, I would say that's when these tunes are definitely more arranged. Like we have, I would say that's the most like classical training, where you're kind of like, there is a plan, and even though there might not be music in front of the musician, like they know the roadmap, and then that's where you kind of get like interesting different arrangements. Like for example, one of the tune types we play, Newmarket House, like that's what I'm thinking, is like Iain's playing like just droning on his bagpipes while I play the tune, and then we play a tune together. And then what's amazing too is then we have Maddie come in on the harp and she's accompanying, and like this has all been practiced. This is all like, you know, we've intricately arranged this arrangement. I'm also thinking like when we do like Lady Dicey, like we sat down and specifically arranged our guitar and bouzouki part, like so there it's like I would say are more intricate arrangements versus going to a session. Now if someone starts playing the tune, if you know it, you play along. If you don't know it, you sit out. And there's no, and in a session, it's generally thought that if, for the most part, usually you play that tune 3 times and then move on to a different tune.
Does the tune encompass the entire A-B structure? Like A part, B part, the whole thing is a tune. Okay.
And I will say, so we generally tunes are A and B. There are some really nifty tunes that are more parts, A, B, C, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E. Those 5-part reels are fun, but also a little bit draining to play. It's like as many parts as there are, that is how long the tune is. But back to what Iain's saying, the universal thing is to hup or to raise a foot, to stare down someone that you know is playing loudly, to know like, hey, I'm going to be moving on to the next tune. So people are aware that this is coming to a close. We're going on to a new tune.
But I would say like probably the biggest thing, like what Cara is talking about with this variation or the arrangement stuff is just, you were asking about variation, Morgan.
Yeah.
Like in a band setting, the variations are planned out, you know, like, we're going to play it this way the first time and this way the second time. We're going to put this twist on the melody. We're going to like put this syncopation in there that wasn't there the first time. All of that stuff. And like we do harmonies a lot in our band. Not everyone does harmony in this music. In fact, it's like not exactly a native concept to Irish music to do harmonies. Whereas like in a session, no harmony. Like if anything, someone might jump to the third of the chord on the very last note. And so you get that at the very end, but that's about it. Like the harmony just comes from like the drones of the uilleann pipes or whatever. And then the variations in a session are going to be more spontaneous and a little less obtrusive, because if what you're playing at a session will clash with what kind of the standard version of the tune is, don't do it. Like, don't be a jerk and try to like draw all the attention to yourself. Like it's a communal experience. Stop trying to show off. Whereas like on a stage, like people will do all kinds of crazy variations that, you know, even if it's not pre-planned, like they might deconstruct the tune and put it back together a totally different way, and that's just great on a stage. Just you wouldn't do it in a session.
Yeah, I want to give an example here. So there's this tune that we play as a band called Alexander's Hornpipe that last time through we are being very show-offy. It's like we're doing all these triplets like up and up and down, but we never would play that way in a traditional session. We actually do have a friend who plays it. And when he's playing it, I'm not going to start trying to play it like I play it on stage. Because again, going back to what Iain was saying, like that's kind of interrupting the community vibe, because you're trying to be a part of the community, not to be like, you know, apart from the community.
Right. So we've got Iain's jig and Alexander's hornpipe. Is there a Cara dance? Cara's reel?
Yes, there is. Thanks for asking. There's a Cara row jig, as I would say that would be my one. Although it's not spelled, it's spelled Carraroe, I think. But yeah.
And that's your dad pun from Cara of the episode.
the one? I only get one?
Yes, I'll take out the electric shock device I have under the table if you bring out another one.
Oh my gosh. Oh. So I know Maddie isn't able to join us today, but I do love one thing that she said once, which was that hard shoes are like percussion. They're like, you can consider them a percussion instrument. So
Totally.
what is that like playing with a dancer, with a live dancer? First of all, just like getting the rhythm and all of that together with the dancer and incorporating that percussion when there are hard shoes. And then also just a way more general logistic, like where do you do that? It's got to take more space, like if you're performing, right? So what's it like? Because I don't think I've seen a lot of Irish bands have a dancer as part of them. Is that special to you guys, or is that more common?
It's not uncommon, but I just want to take a moment here to say that Maddie Ernst is an incredible musician and dancer, and we are so lucky to have her a part of our band because in some ways she's able to translate to us as musicians what she needs as a dancer, which is amazing.
Yeah, that sounds so valuable.
Do that, so it's very helpful. So I would say as far as for us playing with Maddie, it's very seamless because she's able to translate what she needs, and usually what she needs, I would say more than anything, is tempo. So she usually for I believe it's reels, right?
Yeah, reels you need to play really fast.
Really fast. She's just like, play this unbelievably fast, because the faster a reel is, it's easier to dance to, which is kind of counterintuitive as a musician. But
dancers have to deal with this thing called gravity.
Right. Exactly.
The thing is, like, the dance and the tune were meant to go together all along. And so it's just like playing with a really good accompanist. One of the instruments in this tradition that gets kind of the most flack is the Dòrain, which is the circular Irish frame drum, which my brother plays. And part of why people complain about it so much is that if you have a Dòrain player that doesn't understand how the rhythm is supposed to go, you can find yourself playing the music and you find things starting to like slow down more, and just the energy gets sucked right out of the music by a bad Dòrain player. Or same thing for a bad guitarist. Like it can just like totally drain the energy of its music by adding this rhythm instrument. I have never had that experience with a dancer in hard shoes, because like they know the rhythm better than the musicians do, Yeah. And then as for wear, just like, I don't know, usually even when we're playing in a cramped like pub on St. Patrick's Day, where there's people like packed all the way up there, just, Maddie finds a little corner in the stage, and, people see her stand up. So people will like back up and make room for her if need be. And most stages are big enough to accommodate a dancer. They just might not get to do as much traveling around on the stage as they might do otherwise.
Also, a lot of dancers, if they're playing around, they bring their own boards a lot of times. And I was going to say there's like these TikTok influencer brothers that have been doing.
Oh my gosh, the Gardner.
Yes, the Gardner brothers. So I was going to say, like, now I believe you literally can hard shoe anywhere thanks to the Gardner brothers, because I've seen them like hard shoe it all over the place, including like in various countries. So I think if you have a dance board, will travel. People seem to be now, thanks to the Gardner brothers and that influence, are now like, oh, I know this dancing, and are more gracious to seeing it around.
Yeah. I know. I just know there's a lot of kicks and moving. So I was trying to reconcile that with, like, you mentioned the St. Paddy's Day gig where you're in a bar with all these drunk people and you're kicking and
yeah, I mean, and
then like your amps, like even as a singer, like you're standing on stage and you've got the amps and the cables and the like, I don't know. It sounds stressful.
St. Patrick's Day is stressful, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's fun, but oh my God.
Yeah, we could do a separate podcast of how do Irish traditional music players think about St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah, no, give me the 5-second version.
I think the 5-second version is So you think that you should only play this music one day a year?
And no,
Sure.
we don't play Galway Girl.
Yeah.
So you also sing, and
Mhm.
you sing in Gaelic. Is that correct?
Yeah. I picked up Scots Gaelic while I was studying abroad in Edinburgh, and then I kept learning it after I came home. And I was specifically learning it originally just because I wanted to sing in the language. And then while I was there, learned that, oh, wait, it's actually still a living language that people use in their communities. And so that got me really pumped about just learning it as a language in and of itself. And so nowadays, most of the songs I bring to the band are in Gaelic.
So it's Gaelic, the language,
Mhm.
Gaelic, the gay dances at the gay bars. Okay, got it.
Gaelies.
Yeah.
Gaelies. Okay.
Gaelies combined with Keelies. I want to really give a shout out to Iain here that he brings these beautiful songs that are in Scottish Gaelic, and then he will translate them for us a lot of times, so we know about what we're talking about. So it's not just just gobbledygook to us. And then what's amazing is then he'll break it down by syllable. We do this one song, Cara,
Mhm.
thinking of Cara, where he basically just broke down the syllables, but then the harmonies that we do of it, it's like, it's very powerful and moving. And honestly, some of the most beautiful songs I think we do are in Scottish Gaelic language. And I suppose, Iain, do you want to talk maybe more about how, like, the differences or whatever have you to Irish?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That was so nice, Cara. Thank you. The question you just asked about like Gaelic versus Gaelic, there's this language family called the Goidelic languages, and that's Irish, Scots Gaelic, and Manx. And so Gaelic is kind of like the umbrella term for all three.
Okay,
They're
so it
all
wasn't
Gaelic
totally
languages because they're all spoken by the Gaels of all three countries. But no one really refers to any of those languages as Gaelic if you're like in the know. Like
Sure.
in Ireland, it's Irish or Gaeilge. In Scotland, it's Gaelic. In the Isle of Man, it's Manx. Yeah.
And do you speak Irish as well? Do you sing in Irish?
It's like one of those things where those languages were definitely like one and the same once upon a time. They all came from like Old or Middle Irish. And so they kind of were more of a dialect continuum at first. Like, the old adage, like a language is a dialect with a navy. So, I'm sure that had Scotland and Ireland not been, chopped up into two different countries, people would just all refer to all of it as Irish,
Yeah.
And so I can understand written Irish more than I can spoken Irish a lot of the time. I know that speakers of Irish from the north of Ireland can sometimes have like more mutual intelligibility with like Scottish Islanders, like the just reigning queen of Scots Gaelic music, Julie Fallis. Her husband is from not Northern Ireland, but the north of Ireland. And like, they can speak to each other in their respective like Gaelic languages and understand each other just fine, even though they're technically two different languages. But yeah, I can only sing like a couple Irish songs, and some of the Irish songs that I know have then been translated over into Scots Gaelic, like the one we do called Menge on our second album is an Irish song, but I had to look up a Gaelic version of it because I just don't want to butcher this language that I don't know. I want to butcher the language I do know.
Yeah.
And Iain mentioned a name of a great musician, Julie Fallis. I would say go check out her version of Blackbird. She translated into Scottish Gaelic, so it is the Beatles' Blackbird translated into Scottish Gaelic. If you just want a taste.
Nice. Amazing. What do you wish people, generally the public, knew more about Irish music?
I want people to know that you don't have to be Irish to play this music.
Amen to that.
I also want people to know that you don't have to be white to play this music. So that also is hard, because I will say I do want to talk to this a little bit more, in that this I would say this music space tends to be predominantly white because of the ties to the country of Ireland, and then that being predominantly white. But there have been a lot of inroads to talk about this and breaking open that that space to make it more, I would say, tolerant and open to others. And to that, I do want people to know there's a really great book called Trad Nation by Tess Leminski, in which she is talking a lot about, she's taking a gender and LGBTQ lens to studies to traditional music. And I will say it's in the musicology bent, so this might be just some more of people who want to nerd out to this kind of stuff. It might be less for the masses.
It is a very kind of dry academic read, but it is a really impressive book.
But it's impressive, and I will say I appreciate a lot of the commentary that's going on with that. There's a lot of really amazing traditional Irish musician players. I want to point out one of them is coming to Minnesota Irish Music Weekend. Josh Dukes, he's incredible. So I just want to point out that, yes, you don't have to be Irish to play this music. You just have to love the music.
Oh, I love that. Okay, well, I could obviously talk to you for hours and hours. And in fact, when I do see you, we talk for hours and hours. I have one last question for you. So you've already mentioned Zeitgeist. You were, Zeitgeist moment. I won't define it here for you, but as far as a recent or a particularly memorable Zeitgeist moment, I'll give you a moment, and I'll go first, and I'll share one of mine that's specific to Irish. Well, yeah, I love what you said about the living tradition, Cara, because so my biggest way that I interact with Irish influenced music is in contra dancing, which is a completely American thing, but it's done to Irish tunes. And I've been doing this since I was 8. I've had, contra dance callers on the podcast. It's a community I care a lot about. And I remember a moment where I think it was a special dance in Portland. It was like a New Year's Eve dance or something like that. And there was a band, the Great Bear Trio, came out from, I forget where they are based. And they were playing, typically it's pretty straightforward Irish tunes, but then their energy was just amazing. And all of a sudden I realized that they were mixing in the Beatles, and all of a sudden there's just this moment where it's still in the Irish, like there's the feel of it. It's very Irish, but then you have, these hundreds and hundreds of dancers who have been smiling and dancing for hours, and all of them just start singing this Beatles tune that was kind of woven in. And to me, that was such a special moment, because it was like something that's very traditional and hundreds of years old. And then there's something that's very traditional American, less, hundreds, but still quite old in America. And then the Beatles, and then the people playing it, they're fairly young. And it was just this amazing coalescence of history and vibrancy in this moment. So that was one for me. And I would love to hear from both of you what either a particularly memorable or recent Zeitgeist moment was for you.
So my understanding is that Zeitgeist means the spirit of the times, right? So
yeah, it's like the collection of all of the forces, everything, what it feels like to be like if you picture what it feels like right now in our culture versus what it feels like, in the 2000s or in the 90s, or, the zeitgeist is very different. And if you can, the whole idea is if you can plug into all of those other forces, the music comes alive in a zeitgeist moment where it just all kind of, you feel part of something bigger than yourself. You're connecting to the music and the culture and just kind of the universe on a much broader than just listening.
Yeah. Well, I would say, there's one night in particular I'm thinking of when I moved back to the Twin Cities and I started coming out to the sessions at the Merlin's Rest pub. And I hadn't learned the flute yet. All I had was, my whistle, which is, a lot quieter. And it was very humbling starting to come to sessions here and realizing just how many tunes people knew and just how good they were like picking things up by ear, and realizing like, okay, all this that I've learned so far is like a drop in the bucket. And so initially there is kind of like this sense of just kind of like grinding to get into this space and into the music, and like trying to get anywhere on the same level as these other musicians. And then I had kind of the same experience when I was brought on to be an instructor at the Center for Irish Music, because I was like, okay, now I'm like a decent musician, but what the hell am I doing in this room with like these absolutely like jaw-dropping world-class musicians? I don't belong here. Like, I can't hold a candle to like my colleagues here. And so we have a yearly fundraising event there called Aigsha, which is just Irish for like outreach, basically. Aigsha Center for Irish Music. And all the instructors are supposed to get up on a stage and play together in these two groups. And I basically said, you know what, that's okay. Like, I don't really belong on the same stage as these people. I'm just gonna like show up and, I'll like play in this little session at the start as people are filtering in, but I don't belong on the same stage as these people. And then our friend Mary, who's Cara was mentioning earlier, was one of her fiddle teachers there. Basically, after they had already sound checked and did their rehearsal on stage, she just walked up and said, Iain, which group are you playing in? No, you're playing in ours now. And she just like brought me, I was like, but Mary, I don't know these tunes. Like, you guys have arranged all this. You just did all the sound checks. She's like, oh, Cormac can throw another mic on there. You know these tunes. And she just sat down and played them all for me. And like, I just like picked them up on the spot. And then I got up there and played with all of, the other instructors, and just had this feeling of like exhilaration and liberation, and above all, just inclusion. And finally feeling like you are like a part of the family is just, to me, what Irish music is all about, is that sense of like togetherness that you get from it.
Yeah. I'm going to give you 2 moments. I'm sorry. I can't.
No, please.
I'll get the electric shock.
I love these because this is like why we do what we do, right? This is like why we do music. Like, yeah.
So one of the, it's related to, so if Iain was feeling that he couldn't share the same stage, we had this fabulous musician that unfortunately we lost about a couple of years past now, named Martin McHugh. And he was an amazing box player from Connemara, Ireland, and came to the Twin Cities and lived here. And he would always say to you, it's great to share the same stage with you. It's always great to share the same stage with you.
A pleasure sharing the same stage with you.
Yeah, sorry, that's a pleasure to share the same stage with you. And the amazing thing about this man was, when I was starting out playing in the 2010s, he had heard that Merlin's Rest was kind of where the younger folk, shall we say, were going to play. And he made it a point to come out, and then he would play his tunes. And if we didn't know his tune, he would slow it down. And it was when he was doing that, and I was like learning these things by ear, that I kind of felt like here he is extending his arm out to us and saying like, I want you to have this.
Yeah.
And if you, sorry, I'm choking up a little bit just thinking about him because he's no longer with us. But if you want to, here it is, and you can learn this tune from me. And that was a moment when I realized like, oh, this is a gift. This is really amazing gift to have. So that is one Zeitgeist moment. And the other Zeitgeist moment I would say happened just a week ago. For me, I was playing, I will say back to Mary Vinorni, she has helped to bring together some fiddlers, all who are women, to play music together. And we're playing some tunes that are either made famous by women or written by women. And we were just playing these tunes that were written by women, and I was just kind of jamming along, and I was just looking around like, how awesome is this? That I will say, like, here are all these female fiddlers that were all playing these tunes written by women, and it's very like girl power. So that was my other Zeitgeist moment. Sorry, I had to pick 2.
Well, Iain and Cara, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan, for running Zeitgeist Academy and so graciously having us.
Oh, it was so fun talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio. If you'd like to take the next step in your musical journey, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio to join my newsletter. Seriously, it's fun and informative, and I never spam or sell your information. That's zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. Music for this episode was created by Iain Boswell. Please hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends you found a cool new podcast. See you next time.